And right now you can see everyone standing in the courtroom. This is for when the jury members are ushered back in. Just want to let everyone know we're going to be staying right here in this trial, listening into this defense team's turn, giving their closing arguments. You're watching live from Unfiltered here on Live Now from Fox.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good afternoon. Showing you snippet State's Exhibit 18, which Mr. Binger just spent 3 or 4 minutes showing that Mr. Rosenbaum wasn't around. My client couldn't know that he grabs his head in orange. Chain, bag, orange. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had this video almost as long as they've had this video. But Mr. Binger will use this video to lie to your faces and tell you that Kyle Rittenhouse was taking advantage of the situation.
I object, Your Honor.
It's in the picture.
It's argument.
Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not a game. It is my client's life. We don't play fast and loose with the facts, pretending that Mr. Rosenbaum was Citizen A #1 guy. He was a bad man. He was there. He was causing trouble. He was a rioter. And my client had to deal with him that night alone. When I say that the truth matters and this is not a game, what do I mean by that? Mr. Binger is the one who put on the Kandiri brothers. The reason he put them on, in spite of what he might say today, is because he wanted you, now 18, soon to be 12 people, to say, gosh, that kid just went to that place and just protected it. He wasn't asked. He was asked. Mr. Kandiri's asked Nick. Nick got a group of people to go down there. The people from West Bend came. Provocation, another thing. Think back on November 2nd, when this case started. Did you hear one word out of Mr. Binger's mouth about provocation? You didn't, because it was never said. But when his case explodes in his face, now he comes out with provocation. That was opening. And most importantly, in opening, quoting from Mr. Binger's first paragraph of his opening statement on November 2nd, 2021. This occurred after the defendant chased down Mr. Rosenbaum and confronted him while yielding an AR-14. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the videos. Mr. Rosenbaum sees, and I'll show you the video in my closing argument. You'll see Mr. Rosenbaum take off when he sees my client coming along with the Zeminskis to set up the ambush of my client. Provocation? I don't think so. The things that I just pointed out to you, why is that a problem? Because 1, he's lying. 2, he's misrepresenting. Or he wasn't prepared when he started this trial, and his closing argument has been a change to try and fit what has come out. Remember how when he was talking, there's no proof that the Rosenbaum and Zeminski knew each other? Maybe they didn't know each other that night, but they were together throughout the night. You see them together in pictures wreaking havoc in this city. And now we have the magic pixel camera that brings forth his provocation. I'm going to go through the charges and we'll talk about each one of them. Then I'll go through the witnesses and hopefully I'll bring it home in an honest and forthright fashion. Count 1, reckless homicide. My client shot Joseph Rosenbaum. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, there was nothing reckless about my client's conduct that day in regards to Mr. Rosenbaum. Mr. Rosenbaum was coming at him. My client ran from him, retreated, which is not needed, continues to run. The plastic bag is thrown, the metallic plastic bag. Kyle doesn't know what it is at that time. It causes him to turn and look over his shoulder, pointing the gun in that direction. Mr. Rosenbaum, is he dissuaded by that? No, he is not. He continues running and advancing on my client. That whole time, the state doesn't say anything about Mr. Zeminski firing the shot. Mr. Zeminski having his gun up. Think of the circumstances as they existed at 11:50 on August 25th of 2020. He runs through that parking lot. He continues running on. He turns as he comes into that box canyon with the cars, the van, and I believe it's a Pepsi machine. And he turns because he has no place else to go. I'll show you the Zanin video later on. What's important about the Zanin video, you see that mob of people destroying the cars at Car Source 3, which Mr. Binger doesn't want my client to go and try to protect, even though he was asked by those individuals to protect that property. Nick Smith called him, hey, they're bashing up the cars and starting fires. Go down there. He goes down there. He has as much right to go there as anybody else in the city of Kenosha and be unmolested by the likes of Joseph Rosenbaum, Kelly, and Joshua Zeminski. And Mr. Binger says, oh, we'll get the Zeminskis later. Well, ladies and gentlemen, last time I checked, this is still the United States of America, and he has the burden of proof. If he wants you guys to believe that my client pointed a gun at him, call the Zeminskis, put him on the witness stand, ask him questions, and let me or Mr. Sharafasi cross-examine him. That's how we do things in a court of law, but not in Mr. Binger's court. He says, I'm blaming the victim. As a defense lawyer, I might get accused of that more than some other people. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rosenbaum was shot because he was chasing my client and going to kill him, take his gun, and carry out the threats he made. And Mr. Binger wants to make a big hullabaloo about the shot in the back. Remember his opening statement? He shot him in the back. And that's why I'm sitting here in front of the jury like this. Did he shoot him here? Did he shoot him there? Because of the way the bullet went in and where the bullet ended up in the hip. You know full well that the individual, and I asked the doctor, is on a horizontal plane. What is that horizontal plane consistent of? Somebody leaping, lunging at my client. And we know how close Mr. Rosenbaum was to my client. The furthest he could have been when it started, the first shot, 4 feet with the stipling. We know that his hand was on the gun. Mr. Binger wants you to believe that that was just happenstance and accident. Come on, people. Physical evidence does not lie. Use your common sense and good judgment. He talks about Mr. Rosenbaum just somehow ending up down at the riots. Remember that? Mr. Rosenbaum, according to the testimony, walked from the bus center 4 miles out to Ms. Swartz's house, and then he couldn't stay there for some reason, and 4 miles all the way back. That's not just ending up. That's going someplace with a purpose, and throughout the night, you saw his purpose. And there was more than one piece of testimony about Mr. Rosenbaum, whether it was a hospital or whether or not it was a jail. Remember that? And there was testimony regarding his medication. Ms. Swartz said we couldn't get medication because the Walgreens were all boarded up. She said, the hospital said, they gave him his medication. So whatever facility gave him his medication, Mr. Binger, the man with the burden of proof, why didn't he bring in a hospital or a jail to prove that Mr. Rosenbaum was properly medicated? He'd been off his medications, according to Ms. Swart, for 7 to 10 days. We know that he was acting like somebody who wasn't on their proper medication. He was not acting normal. Next. Richard McGinnis. Reckless. And here, Mr. McGinnis, I'd like to talk about, because the self-defense does not go to Mr. McGinnis, but if Kyle was privileged in exercising self-defense against Mr. Rosenbaum, it carries over to the endangering count of Mr. McGinnis. And Mr. McGinnis, specifically, if the defendant, and I'm reading directly from an instruction, page 9, second full paragraph, which you will be given, if the defendant was acting lawfully in self-defense, his conduct did not create an unreasonable risk to another. That is Mr. McGinnis. Ladies and gentlemen, when my client shot Joseph Rosenbaum, he feared for his life. He feared because of the prior threats, the prior statements, and the violent acts that had been witnessed by my client. Mr. McGinnis, as a witness, I think he helped us more than he hurt us. He talked about, and this was on cross for Mr. Binger, how do you know what Mr. Rosenbaum was thinking? He goes, I don't, but I know he at Kyle Rittenhouse. Why is he yelling the FU? One of two things. One, to intimidate, or two, he got into a situation over his head. Thinking, as he said before chasing him, you won't do shit, MFer, to my client. Well, he was wrong. He states Kyle did not know that he was there, meaning Richard McGinnis. He's a citizen journalist who was running along with his hand, in his phone in his hand, up in the air, in to get a story. My client is not responsible for endangering him when he runs into danger. Plus, the instruction says that if he was privileged as to Rosenbaum, he's privileged as to count 2, Mr. McGinnis. Count 3, jump kick man. The uncomplaining, unidentified witness in count 3. There will be some video later on when I'm going through some of that. You'll see, and I ask you to pay attention. The state has said he's not kicking him. He doesn't hit him. When you watch the video, and it'll be in slow motion, watch where his foot goes, watch what happens to Kyle's head. The force of him kicking him in the face spins his body 180 degrees around. And then it's on. Huber coming in from behind, hitting him in the neck with the skateboard. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see throughout event number 2, and this is the beginning of it, is individuals working in a mob. They don't know what happened at Car Source 3, event number 1. But somebody said, hey, he shot somebody. Doesn't know that he was being chased by a crazy person. But they're going to get their licks in on Kyle Rittenhouse, or, as they perceive him, somebody from the other side who has been putting out their fires, causing problems for them, stopping them from wreaking havoc in Kenosha like they did the night before. And ladies and gentlemen, the standard is likely to cause death or great bodily harm. Great bodily harm is defined as likely to cause serious bodily injury. A kick to the head is likely to cause a serious injury. Did my client suffer a debilitating injury as a result of that? No, but that's not the standard. Mr. Huber, he's a rioter, pushing a dumpster lit on fire, going to the barricades to pick up pepper balls, throw them back, pointing his middle finger at the police. He's assisting Rosenbaum at the gas station, hits Rittenhouse 2 times with the skateboard, and attempts to disarm him. You'll see it all in the slow motion video later on. And Kyle Rittenhouse is running away from Anthony Huber. The state wants to call my client an active shooter. And the reason they want to do that is because of the loaded connotations of that word. Everyone has heard of the theater killings, the school shootings, and things like that. Ask yourself, the definition of an active shooter is somebody with a plan to inflict multiple casualties, usually out of anger or animus towards a group. This case, what caused Kyle Rittenhouse to shoot somebody? Joseph Rosenbaum. He runs after shooting Joseph Rosenbaum for almost 2 blocks before scene number 2. Mr. Binger makes a big thing about Kyle Rittenhouse not staying around Car Source 3 after the shooting. Ladies and gentlemen, if Kyle Rittenhouse had stayed at Car Source 3, all that would have happened is it would have made the police have an easier job, because scene 1 and scene 2 would have been put in the same location. My client ran 2 blocks without shooting at anyone, pointing at anyone, doing anything to try and get away. He tells the individuals he's going to the police, and he's running in that direction when he stopped. He's hitting the head with a hand with a rock in it, knocking his hat off. Mr. Binger says, oh, he just knocked his hat off. I don't think that individual was trying to steal Mr. Rittenhouse's hat. He was trying to take his head off. Who comes in next? Anthony Huber, for the first time. Hits him. Opening statement, Mr. Binger, was he takes a swing at him. Now it's he blocked, because we took the videotape and lightened it up. Huber strikes him in the head and arm the first time. Jump kick man comes in, kicks him in the face, spins his body 180 degrees, and Anthony Huber comes in for the second lick to the shoulder neck area, trying to take his head off. And when he does that, his other hand goes grabbing for the gun, his bare hand onto the gun and pulling it away from Kyle Rittenhouse. Mr. Binger wants Kyle to sit there and hope and pray to God his strap works, and Anthony Huber can't get the gun. We don't know that. We'll never know that, as he's running away from him. A shot as the gun is being separated from his body, and you'll see the butt way far away when the shot is finally fired. Even Gage Grosquith said he was concerned about the blows that Jump Kick Man and Anthony Huber were inflicting on Kyle's head. That's probably the only thing I agree with Mr. Grosquith. Gage Grosquith. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what Kyle did under those facts and circumstances was unreasonable, that he was not entitled to self-defense. Consider all the events that had occurred that evening. Him being attacked, kicked in the head, hit in the head with a skateboard, other individuals running up on him, and now Mr. Grosquith runs up on him. And the first action of Mr. Grosquith, and I'll go through the video later, is really, he's running in, the hand is coming up, and the gunshot with Huber goes off. And the natural reaction is to flinch. He covers up. And then he pulls his hands up. And as he's standing with his hands up, look, he's not gripping the gun anymore in a pistol grip. Hands apart, hands up. And as he comes in to finish the job, the hand is on the gun going for Mr. Rittenhouse. And he says it's an involuntary movement. The shot comes before it gets directly to his head. But the motion is coming, the shot, and it continues on with that momentum. Enough momentum to go through the bullet and point directly at Kyle's head. Does Kyle fire again? No, he doesn't. Actions likely to cause death or great bodily harm. And he is coming in with a loaded Glock. And we asked Mr. Gage Groswitz about it. He wouldn't even admit that there was one in the chamber. That's why we had to put on the officer to talk about the unfired shell casing. Bukowski talked about clearing the weapon and a live round coming out. Because Groswitz won't say anything that puts him in a bad light.
Thank you again to all of our viewers watching here with us on Live Now from Fox. You can see in our small